Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'll call the meeting to order of this special session of the Board of Commissioners meeting. And I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge. Present. Commissioner Thompson. Present. Commissioner Unger. Present. Mayor Wilkerson.
Present. And the first item on the agenda is the second reading of the ordinance. Solicitor Ross, please read.
An ordinance of the City of Frankfort, Kentucky, making certain findings concerning and establishing a development area for economic development purposes within the city to be known as the Downtown Frankfort Development Area, approving a local participation agreement between the city, the County of Franklin, Kentucky, and the Department of Finance of the City of Frankfort, Kentucky as the agency, establishing an incremental tax special fund for payment of project costs and redevelopment assistance, designating the Department of Finance of the City of Frankfort, Kentucky as the agency responsible for oversight, administration, and implementation of the development area, authorizing the mayor and other officials to take such other appropriate actions as are necessary or required in connection with the establishment of the development area. This ordinance establishes the Downtown Frankfort Development Area for economic development purposes within the city, approves the local participation agreement between the city, county, and city finance department as the administering agency, establishes an incremental tax special fund for payment of project costs and redevelopment assistance, designates the city finance department as the agency responsible for oversight, administration, and implementation of the development area, and authorizes the mayor and other officials to take appropriate action connected with the development area. Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion, debate? Ask the clerk to please call for a vote.
Commissioner Waldridge.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Unger.
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes. The motion carries to pass the second reading of the ordinance for the TIP. The next item is a first reading of the budget.
We'll present the budget and then do the readings that are in.
Yes.
Let's go that way. If there are any changes we can make, we won't have to have the
Okay.
first reading.
Perfect.
Okay?
Let's go over the budget first then.
Hello.
Is that okay?
Presentation first.
Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
That's fine.
I'm fine, thank you. Okay.
Just so she doesn't feel like she's on a hot seat by herself, I said, I'll come down here and sit, that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
I think you like being on the hot seat, Tommy.
Doesn't bother me at all, Commissioner.
For being truthful, I told him he had to come down here. Okay, so thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to present the annual budget. Hopefully everything will go smoothly and you guys will be in agreement and we can have that first reading. That'd be great. So, okay, so this will be the way it'll flow. We'll have a budget overview and then I can provide some department highlights, and during that section, if you have particular questions, if I can't answer, I've got the directors back here that are going to be able to help me answer any questions you may have, and then we'll segue into capital improvements and capital assets. And then lastly will be the sewer operations, maintenance, and capital projects budget as well. And if at any time you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to stop me, and we'll try to answer those the best that we can. Okay, so budget overview. Oh, sorry, shoot. Might have gone too far. No, I did not. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background on how we approach this budget, starting in March, we met with the department heads, Tommy and I did, and we started crafting the budget, and they brought their necessary expenditures as well as what we would like to call a wish list of some other items that they would have liked to have purchased but weren't necessarily something that they absolutely had to have. So we got all that information gathered, and then Tommy and I spoke a lot about what was a number we would feel comfortable with. Well, the number that we felt comfortable with was basically a flat amount of expenses looking at the 2020 fiscal year, because let's face it, 2021 was, it was a lot different for a ton of different reasons. So we went with the 2020 expenses, which were roughly around 35,200,000 or so. Then from that point, we looked at, okay, what do we know we have to increase? And of course, the very first thing that pops up is the 12% pension increase. So we had to tack that on top of it. And then also back in October of 2020, we had the previous commission who awarded a COLA for everyone. So that got tacked on. And then we also put another 2% COLA in that would be effective for this fiscal year. So that's how we got to the budgeted expenditures of 36.9 million and some change. So just to kind of give you an idea. And another thing I'd like to think we did, we didn't completely do it this way, but it was kind of like a hybrid, but it was, close. A lot of these types of things we did. We did a lot of zero-based budgeting. So rather than just simply say, okay, our budget last year was X amount for individual line items, so we're just going to carry those forward, we really, with the department heads, and they were instrumental and helped us a ton with this, we decided, let's really take a deep dive and see if we truly needed those budgeted amounts that we've always had in the past. So in some instances, yes, in some instances, no. So just to kind of give you an idea of how we approached it. So before I go on, I just want to say this was a very thoughtful budget, and I feel comfortable with the numbers, and I know Tommy does as well. City Manager Russell does as well. So, but if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. So thank you. Okay. So on the revenues, that's this first slide. I put the occupational taxes and net profit taxes and insurance license taxes up individually because when you look at those four categories, those make up about 24 million of our over $36 million budget. And I put grants and aid in there as well because in fiscal years 21 and 22, we've got CARES money sitting in those amounts and relief money sitting in those amounts that we won't have going into fiscal year 23. So I wanted to make you aware of those. So in fiscal year 21, we had CARES money of roughly 2.5 million, I think, and then we're estimating to get ARPA, what I call relief money, the relief funds, ARPA, of roughly 3.5 million, and we're going to get another 3.5 million in fiscal year 22. So that does skew the revenue numbers a little bit, but I just want to make you aware of that. And I know some of you have asked those types of questions, and we told you that before, but just to get everybody on the same page with the revenues. We're hoping that the state's occupational tax numbers come in higher than what I've estimated. I've never wanted to be more wrong about something in my life than I do that state occupational tax amount. So I'm hoping that it comes in at a much higher amount, but I know I told a few of you guys, I would rather be conservative and it come in better than to, shoot for more and then it not be that way. So I just felt it was more fiscally responsible to come in with a lower number. So does anybody have any questions at all about the revenue portion of the PowerPoint? Okay, we'll move on to the expenditures. And this is just the general fund, of course, and this is total expenditures. Now, I'm estimating, and with the help of my finance group, especially the deputy finance director back there, we feel like 36.6 million is a rough, good actual estimate of what our true expenditures will be for fiscal year 21. Even though we have an amended budget of a little over 39 million or roughly 39 million, we had a ton of amendments, and we had amendments for Humane Society and then for the women's shelter as well. But we're waiting on, I guess, some additional criteria to be met before we make those payments. So that's why that amended budget for 2021 is a little bit higher. But, down the road, we can always do the amendment when we get ready to pay those payments out, when they bring them to us, So as I stated earlier, the proposed budget for 2022 is $36,983,450. Very, very thought out, includes a 2% COLA for this year. And unfortunately, we don't have any control over it, 12% pension increase. And just briefly about that, that's probably gonna happen, a 12% pension increase over the next several years. I went out on the website today and it actually says through 2028. I plan to be in Florida on a golf course, but I'm just telling you, 2028. So it's possible that that could happen. I mean, now obviously that's subject to legislative change, but it's possible. So did you, sir, you were shaking your, not right now, okay.
We'll need you here.
Do what?
Saying like that.
We'll
He
need
said
you
you'll
here.
need you here.
Oh, sure. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this one? Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna go into department highlights. If there's anything I cannot answer, I've got my folks back here with me. I wanted them to sit right behind me, but they chose the table, but that's fine. So I made the city manager sit beside me, so. Okay, so we'll first talk about public safety. Obviously, that's that is the biggest part of our budget, roughly. I did the math earlier. It's probably in my notes somewhere. It's roughly around maybe 17 million of our budget is public safety. Obviously, a very important part of the city's services. So I did the spreadsheets this way because I wanted you all to see that we truly did where we could cut operating costs, because pensions, COLAs, those types of things made our personnel costs go up for each of the departments. So we try, as I said, Tommy and I tried to cut where we could, knowing we were going to be adding in personnel costs. And as you can see, for each of those individual departments, costs did go up for personnel, except for emergency management. It went down just a little bit. But the thing about emergency management is that 2021 was a unique situation for emergency management. You know, they handled our COVID response, pandemic response. And so what we tried to do with emergency management is get it back down to basically fiscal year 20 level, 20 amounts, and I feel like we did that. That's why if you look at the operating costs under emergency management, the budget's $831,000 and some change for 2021. We ran all the COVID and FEMA expenses through emergency management just so we could put them all together, even if it was fire or police or whomever. That's why that budget's so much more, but you'll see in 2022 it's gone back down to a more reasonable amount at 44,000 and some change. So I really don't think there's anything that's too unexpected here. And I'll move on to the next slide, and it has a few things in it. So for E911, we have experienced some staffing problems, and so we did budget for a full amount of E911 staff members at 18, I think, Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 18 folks. And so what happened was, when you can budget for a full amount of people, then I budgeted less for the part-time folks, so the amount of that it might cost us. So hopefully, when you put those things together, whatever staffing levels we need, we should have plenty enough budget for E911. Like I said earlier, emergency management operating costs align with 2020. And then for Chief Briscoe's area, emergency medical services and fire, they are budgeted at pretty much a full staff of 87, I think. And then also for police, same thing. Chief Adams does have his personnel costs reflect full staff of 63 officers. I keep looking back to make sure I'm telling you guys correctly. So, and that's pretty much the public safety operations. Do you guys have any questions on that? Yeah.
Do you mind if I have Chief Briscoe and Chief Adams come up so I can ask them a couple
Absolutely
questions?
not. Come on up, yeah.
Gentlemen, I appreciate you all working with staff and getting personnel costs where they are. What I want to make sure is, with regard to EMS services and fire, I have some general concerns about retention and pay at this point, and I want to know where we are with regard to surrounding counties and if we are competitive, and at the same time, are we doing what we can to keep up with the technology and equipment that you need with regard to EMS and fire at this point?
So the easy part first is technology and equipment. Yeah, we're keeping pace.
Okay.
I think we got our second half of our fire truck coming in, which will replace our North Fire Supply engine 2. Our next truck wouldn't be due until fire apparatus until 27, 28, which would be a ladder truck for next door. EMS equipment still doing good. The only problem with technology and everything is maintenance. As technology's gotten better, they are more prone to breakdowns, and that has impacted us pretty significant this year. As far as recruitment retention, it's something I've studied quite a bit. We are lagging behind. To know those exact numbers will require a little bit more dive into looking at historic pay studies that we've collected over the last year and a half or so to push forward. But that is something that would happen in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Hopefully that we push recruitment, retention, salary stuff to you.
I hope we can look at that and really take a dive into it. I know in EMS and fire that you guys have lost a few people to geographically local areas, mainly for pay, I think is the real reason. I want to make sure that we are competitive in there. And you feel that you'll have a full staff with the personnel that you have budgeted here?
Assuming we get people to apply and come out and seek a job opportunity, that is our goal. It's our goal every year. But I think as we've seen over the last 2 years of test cycles, test numbers are low.
Right.
They're not only low here, they're low Lexington, Louisville's, across the nation. It's hard to recruit people into public safety currently. Hopefully we'll start to see a little rebound, and when we start to dive into the recruitment retention stuff a little bit deeper, we offer those incentives that will pinpoint the youth to come out and look for those jobs.
I hope that we can have those conversations in the next budget cycle and to be able to figure out what we can do to get those classes up and figure out how to get some training for some young folks to get into that field. I know it's really low numbers at this point. I just want to figure out how to incentivize that and make that happen. Has your run volume on EMS gone up significantly during 2020 and 2021 over years past?
So 2021, COVID, we saw a little bit lower run volume,
Okay.
but we saw our higher acuity. So we were people that were needing to go to the hospital were going.
Right.
I think as we start to come back out of it, we're starting to see those numbers trick back up. So we on average see somewhere around 600 runs a year increase, and the more opportunities we have to get transports out of the hospital, I think that's going to be key in the future, because they're going to start demanding a little bit more of us. Just looking at the regional demographic of who's making those runs. So we're going to continue to see them go up. Just from a historical perspective, our fourth ambulance we added back in 90s, we've saw about a 50 to 60% increase since we've added that one ambulance. So we watch it and make sure where we need to start identifying when we need to add that fifth one full time, but we do run it sparingly during peak hours.
Has there been a shift in percentages of runs that you're running from, because I know you're running the EMS service for the county too, is there been a shift in the total numbers that you've had?
No, they stick around anywhere from 26 to 28%.
Okay.
Last year it was at a 26%. Looks like we're coming in this fiscal year at 28. So we've hovered that 26, 28% since pretty much the inception of the interlocal on EMS.
Okay.
That's kind of a strange anomaly. You would think that would change, but it hasn't changed year after year when we looked at that. And I will add that Chief Briscoe and I have had a couple of very in-depth conversations about retention and pay, and Commissioner Waldridge was the last one I briefed on the budget today, and I threw out the ideas to her. So those things are in the works, and we've looked at them and think that we have some very good ideas on incentive for people to stay longer and to take the full 20 or 25 years.
Good.
And the
Thank you.
incentive.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to clear some of that out and some of the concerns that I had heard, and I wanted to make sure we were good and that we had a plan for next year, so.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Good.
Like I said, I've been pretty upfront with a lot of past commissions, and we're hitting high retirement years.
Yeah.
When you look at 22, 23, 24, and probably fiscal year 25,
Yeah.
that's when we went through big hiring classes. So you're going to see 7, 10 people hitting those 20, 24-year marks that's going to be looking at retirement.
Thank you. That's all I have for Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Chief Adams, thank you. I have similar questions for you. I want to make sure that with the increased issues in town, crime rates, criminal charges that are popping up, that you guys not only are budgeted for the full staff personnel, but that you have that you're budgeted for a full cadre of personnel, if you will. I know at one time you all were talking about bringing a social worker on staff, and you were thinking about adding some other administrative roles for some people. And I just kind of wanted to touch on those and see where you felt we were. When just to show my age, some 20 years ago when you and I were young guys, the numbers were a lot higher. I think they were in the 70s or maybe even the low 80s at one point. And I just want to make sure that we are covering all of the areas of the city, and also that are we retaining, are we getting folks in to apply and things of that nature, and are we staying on pace with the salaries and wages?
As far as the salaries go, I think, like Chief Briscoe said, the pay study will help us.
Mhm.
I mean, you hear the rumblings, you hear that so-and-so's paying more, or so-and-so,
Right.
till we actually see what they are really paying. That'll help with that. Currently, we are full staffed at 63. 3 of those have to go to the academy, so they really don't help us much until they get done, because unlike some smaller departments where they might actually put those people right on the road as officers, we don't do that until they come out of the academy. So what was
Specialized personnel.
Specialized personnel.
specialized, we're doing pretty good right now. We do know that there's a need for the social worker. City manager and I have discussed that multiple times, and we agree that could be a very useful position when the budget allows. As far as inside the department, we're doing pretty good right now. I think we're getting ready to lose one of our part-timers that's an evidence tech, but other positions are pretty well staffed. So,
Okay.
I mean, really, our recruit numbers are small, but last year the commission approved a change in our hiring process to where we could do it quarterly and allow us to keep our better applicants closer to the top. So when an opening does happen, we can draw straight from that list, and it's current with good applicants at the top. We will, while technically we're full staffed, come August 1st, we'll be short again. It never lasts long.
Right.
When I came on 22 years ago, we did have 73 officers,
Right.
and we got cut back to 63 in 2008 when the financial
Right.
crunch hit. So
Okay.
And I guess that's one of those questions is, how did we determine 73 was a fully staffed mark and then now it's 63? And I don't know the answer to that, and I apologize, but that's a question that I have. Who determined this? Did you determine you could live with 63?
not me. I was only
I mean,
I was a lieutenant, I think, at the time, so I didn't make that decision. But I think that's where our staffing was. We were short. We generally run short. Right now is an anomaly. So I think our actual manpower was 70 with the COPS grant. You're allowed to hire 3 more above your what your allotment was. So we were at 73 when I got hired, and then we were at 62 or 63 in 2008, and that's just where they left it.
Or it stayed for the last 13 years.
Mhm.
Okay. Can I ask you about technology stuff? And not only are you keeping up with it, but cameras in vehicles, body cameras, I know we just did an issue with the drones that you had for large events and things. Are we keeping up with that? I know at one point there was an issue with keeping up with making sure everything was, all the equipment was being taken care of and things. I want to make sure that we are at least addressing those issues if they haven't been taken care of at this point.
So we do need, so as far as car cameras go, some of our older ones that actually rely on DVDs still are falling apart on us. So, and they're getting to the point, they've actually phased those out. The company doesn't produce those anymore. So I did ask for a quote for that. It is pricey. We'll probably look to see if we can find a grant that might help offset some of that. The body-worn cameras, you'll see on the next meeting asking for approval to apply for another grant that we already used once to finish outfitting the rest of the department with body-worn cameras. So that'll be there.
Do you mind me asking what that car camera cost would be to get everything up to speed and on the same technology?
The system we use costs a little over $5,000 a system, and we need 23 of them. So 115,000 probably.
And what do you lack on body cameras right now?
We're short 17, and those were, so our first group that we bought went to patrol because they have the most public interaction. This will outfit all of our detectives and all of the rest of our administrative staff.
So everybody out on street patrol
Has a camera, yeah.
has a camera. Okay.
One of the good things that the CARES money allowed us to do was to go in, if we needed new tools or new things to help take care of some technological issues for COVID or things of that nature, we could spend the CARES money on that, which we did. And I know Chief Briscoe spent quite a bit of money with the CARES money on different technological items and equipment. And you didn't spend as much, but we did spend some from the CARES fund, which was allowed. It had to fit certain parameters, and we spent what we could on that.
Well, I want to make sure that you guys have what you need, and obviously if we can do anything to assist with those grants or do anything, that's fine. But if things don't come through, I want to have that conversation with you or city manager or the commission to figure out how to make sure these things are fixed. Just from personal experience, I know how hard it is to prosecute a case if you don't have a camera.
Right.
How socially aware you have to be with body cameras and things of that nature. So I want to make sure that we do everything we do as a city government to make that happen. So if we're 6 months out and we haven't gotten a grant or that money to come through, I hope you'll come to me or the city manager and we can have that talk again and figure out what we can do in the next budget or sooner. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Adams. I appreciate it.
Well, just on that, the same with the social worker too. It's not in the budget this year, is that right?
It is not right now. All the department heads have been told if they have something that they want to bring it back to us, we'll do it as a budget amendment, put it back on there. We had a very good conversation yesterday, I think, as I'm kind of an older guy, about the social worker. I fully agree with that 100%. I just think that we need to establish the parameters, and we had conversation about grant, and some of the grants kind of limit the interaction of the social workers. So those things those are what we're looking at right now, whether we have to fully fund that position or we can utilize a grant to go that route.
Mayor, if you don't mind
Sure.
me, I think we all agree that that is an important position that we want to see. It goes without saying, we have a tremendously high amount of substance abuse issues in town. I think we're on pace to have the highest drug overdose numbers that we've ever had in the history of Frankfort and Franklin County. And whatever tools we need to get to fix that in any way to save one life, and it's worth us, budgeting the money for it. So whatever we can do, I think this commission is fully behind you to make sure that happens. And you too, Mr. City Manager, that we want that to happen. And we want a qualified individual, so we want them to be paid well and
Right.
do the job. So whatever we can do to help, that's what we want to do. And I hate to speak for everybody else, but we've had those conversations and we think it's important, so.
And I think that's one of those things, we get the job description done, get the budget passed, we come back, make a budget amendment, find the right person for the job, because a lot of times we don't need his people to be the second interaction that somebody has, you know, although they're the first, because they're first responders. We need a professional to come in, just like emergency management. They don't need to bring me in on something where I need his social worker in there. So there'll be a lot to do with that position, and to find the right person, get the right job description, and the right salary for that person will be paramount. I think that's something that we work at,
Absolutely.
pushing into the summertime.
And
Sure.
I just want to add, I know that we brought this up, you know, in last year for last year's commission, and COVID and things and other things take priority. So I definitely support this and think that, as Tommy stated, you know, we had talked about grants, I think then as well, but also maybe working with Ms. Snow, who has also been very supportive of, you know, getting a social worker as well, and working with her. She's doing an excellent job here in the community with our juveniles, and things of that nature. So I think working with her maybe would support a grant to do a partnership with her or the Robinson Foundation, things of that nature, just to help us support to grab more grants, I guess.
Yeah,
The more people that are supportive in a grant are usually to get approved or accepted versus just one entity applying for it. But I think we should continue to keep Ms. Snow definitely in the loop and her working. But I think it's great to have a social worker come and be there, like you said, through overdoses, and that social worker to be able to follow up. So there's not, hopefully, you know, there's an intervention versus another overdose. You know, I know I met with some of you guys during the time of COVID, and there was a couple that was just like back-to-back overdoses in one day. You know, how can we keep that from happening? How can we educate and train the families as well to help in that? And how often do you check on someone like that may be upstairs and they've overdosed several times a day? So definitely supportive of it. Is there anything I can do? Let me know. But completely ditto everything that he said as well. But I'm excited, so I hope we can get that soon.
That person will be a very busy person.
Very busy.
Yes,
very
indeed.
busy.
All right, and that's why, if we need it, if we need to put it in the budget now, we'll put it in the budget
Yeah.
now.
So we need to get the job description written to see what other
Yeah.
funding is out there, and we'll get it back on track just as soon as we can.
And maybe even work with the health department on seeing what they can do as far as funding or grants. But I agree with the mayor, like it needs to, I think amendment
ready
needs
to
to
do it.
happen very
It'll be a
soon.
focus.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
thank you.
So along those same lines, since you guys brought that up, one of the things that we encouraged the directors to do, as Tommy said, as City Manager Russell said, was to bring to you guys anything that they felt they really truly needed, because our budget, you know, as you know, it's pretty tight, and the money that we spend would basically be coming out of our general fund unreserved fund balance. And then the other thing that I would like to encourage you to consider as well is waiting until October, when we can see how many people the state truly did bring back. Because like I said, I'm hoping that my number is completely wrong and way too low, and we get more of the state workers back so we can get more of that occupational tax money in as well. So that's something to consider too, in addition to obviously the description and things of that nature that we talked about the social worker position with Chief Adams, and so that's definitely something that I think we all agree we could obviously use. So just to kind of put some other ideas in your mind about some of those things too, and some of the discussions we had in-house too. So, okay, any more questions on public safety? Okay. Oh, no problem. Okay, we're gonna move on to Public Works. This is obviously a very important section of the general fund budget as well. It's a little over 6 million. I did the math, and I'm sure I've got a note here somewhere, but I think Public Works in total, and it includes transit, of course, it's, well, actually, I could look at it right there. It's about 6.5 million. So, as you can see, the personnel costs, as I've stated earlier, those went up for the obvious reasons. But then, as you can also see, our operating costs for Public Works, we cut where we could, and where, the directors didn't feel, or the director did not feel that she necessarily needed budget there. So she did a really good job of working with the city manager and me on that. So if you don't have any questions on this particular spreadsheet, I can move on. Otherwise, if you have questions, we can entertain any of those. Any questions? Okay.
Public Works is probably what generates most of your all's phone calls.
Oh,
So
yeah.
We try to keep that as fully staffed as we can to cut
Yeah.
down, because as we cut those things, you know, your all's telephone calls are gonna go up.
Right.
Obviously, there's a big increase in the sanitation personnel.
Hang on.
Because of COVID.
Well, we did reflect an additional full-time position in sanitation. And then, of course, sanitation already had a larger personnel cost to begin with. So 12% pension increase is gonna look more for sanitation as well. And then, of course, the 2% COLA.
And we used to staff with inmates from the jail.
Yeah.
They had to stay at home, so we had to reach out to DECO to get temp employees to come in. So there was a huge difference in that cost there, and
Right.
that's the majority of that.
Which is reflected in operating costs, yes. So, yeah.
So in using a deco, because I wanted to bring this up, with that, would we be going back to using inmates eventually due to one time?
Jakes.
And are we considering having a few full-time employees of sanitation with benefits to allow us consistency as we're picking up trash? Because it tends that, yes, we have inmates that can help us with our budget. However, consistency is if they're there for 2 months, 3 months, and they're gone, and they know the rules and regulations of what trash goes with where, and it also helps in our sanitation area to separate that. Is there a way that maybe one per truck or whatever it may be to have a full-time person to help teach those inmates or stay? Because I know we have that issue.
So I have to live with what Byron tells me. And when he said he needed another person, then, okay, I'll get you another person, because I know that generates phone calls.
Yeah.
The problem right now we have is Jake's getting ready to turn some people loose. Jake doesn't have enough inmates.
Right.
So when the governor released so many because of good behavior or minor offenses, charges like that, I'm sure they will tend to trickle back into the system, but they haven't done that yet. I had a conversation with Jake a couple of 3 weeks ago to see, and he said he's starting to put back out road crews, and then we'll go back to that when he gets them available, and that will help. But when Byron asked me for more people because of that, I think it's not so much the people that ride the back of the truck, but his drivers and people that are in supervision or supervisory capacity is what he needed then at that time.
Do you think that it could be possible, I'm all for intervention, and I'm sure Kyle would appreciate this, but let's say that the gentlemen that were released on good behavior, they may have something around their ankle or what have you, or have to follow probation. I would say that I'm not great with the law, but they would have to find a job within so many times. Is there a way that if we know that we're releasing them on good behavior, that we could offer them a part-time job or what have you, so they can be in a job that they've already had, as well as adhere to
We
their
can
program
look
as an
into it.
intervention, because it is hard to find a real good job coming out of those. But that's a way for us to have an intervention program to help them
Yeah, the good
become
and the bad
successful.
part is Franklin County Regional Jail, so we get inmates from, other counties that come in here. But the ones that are released here, I'm sure we can try to track them. I've been actually to the access shelter to see if some of those guys want to work, and some of them actually were gonna go work for some buddies of mine on farms setting tobacco. So with their new director over there, or interim director, or whatever Billy's title is, and we've reached out to them, and I'll do so again to see if I can get them in.
I would suggest that, I'm sorry, Mayor, I would suggest talking to the state probation and parole out on the west side of town. And I know that they try to get some folks some jobs and get them employed, so that's something to consider.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think sanitation and the costs that we have, we've talked about this in our meetings. I think that's something we need to review with regard to not only our recycling but our garbage program, and I think that is one of the reasons that we need to have that joint meeting with the county, and I think that's something to consider.
Well, and another point to make as well, on that sanitation budget, that I'm not entirely sure how many full-time people are included in the sanitation budget already. 10, maybe? Does that sound about right?
I think.
Oh, higher. 12 or 13, okay. So, yeah, I knew there was several people already budgeted there at full-time employees, and that's actually an additional new full-time position as well for sanitation. So hopefully that'll help some, but obviously, as the city managers stated, we'll be happy to look at, you know, bringing on some part-time folks and seeing how that impacts our budget. You know, like I said, I'm anxious to see what our occupational tax comes in, what it looks like coming in from the state in October. We'll get that payment in October. So, but obviously we can entertain that idea before then even, but just something to consider there as well. We did add some seasonal staff to the streets department. We added an additional part-time position to buildings, and then for transit, I think she had a limited bus routes or something that, so her staffing level was down just a little, but we've budgeted for, I want to say, a seasonal, a couple of part-times, and a couple of full-time positions to add to that. And the good thing about transit is we get reimbursed for at least half of the cost of that particular department through the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So that's always a plus. And over in the revenue section of the budget that you've got a copy of, it reflects that. So whatever we budget for transit, I put a revenue amount over in the revenue category as well. So.
And last year they were fully funded.
Yeah.
Through federal dollars, and this year they were gonna be fully funded, but then they reduced it to half again, and there's still conversation about it going back to being fully funded again.
Will this budget allow for regular transit runs throughout the city, with
Puts
back-
her up to 24.
They have started to increase volume, ridership and runs and add other buses. I know they're talking about, and Jennifer talks about West 2 or East 3, you know, these are things that, you know, I'm just best guessing and trying to figure out, but as the volume, as the social distancing order has decreased, the mask mandate is still on, but more and more people are riding the bus, you know.
Right.
The conversation was always whether the quarter was worth it. We can't not charge anything. So honestly, to be able to save time, we'd be better off making $1 so you don't have to make change every time. But I understand the economic impacts on those people, so if a quarter it is, a quarter it is. But that's something to consider if we need to change the fees or something like that. But the ridership is starting to increase, and they are adding buses at this time,
Good, thank you.
different bus routes.
Well, and that personnel cost reflects 24 people. And the thing about transit, when I asked Jennifer this, their part-time folks truly work a 1,200-hour year, and their seasonal people truly work a 1,500-hour year. As in, you know, with parks, for instance, that's a little more hit and miss on whether someone's truly going to work that full amount of hours. But for transit, according to Jennifer, that's what actually happens. And Commissioner Unger might be able to attest to that as well. So, but yeah, that's my understanding anyway. So, any other questions on Public Works?
I think in Public Works, under the recycle, I know I'd sent something to Ms. Beard, as well as I think the city manager got a copy of Rubicon that's moving their headquarters to Lexington. The recycle that works, it's a recycling that also works with cities, governments as well. And I was just wondering, do we have any information on that, or do you think that may be a positive in rethinking our recycle now that Rubicon will have their headquarters in Lexington?
Yeah, we reviewed that bid. Isn't that bid out, Sarah, right now? Where is Miss Sarah?
Right here.
Please.
Okay, great.
I'll move out of the way.
I know Katie figured out when this meeting was, and she went to Florida, so.
Yeah, it was no accident. You're stuck with me, sorry.
Morning, Commissioner
Well,
May.
she did reply back pretty quickly when I sent her the information when it hit the stand that Rubicon was coming to
Yeah.
Lexington. I was like, oh, maybe it could save us money, but.
Yeah, so in terms of the most recent bid for recycling contract, it is already closed, we already opened bids. We got one response. So
if Rubicon, were to locate in Lexington and actually offer, I didn't know if they were offering recycling or just services for, but I mean that would certainly be something that might affect us in the future, just depending on whether or not they were willing to submit a bid, if they were competitive, and it certainly wouldn't be negative to have more options. So, yeah.
Are we
Anything
allowed to
else?
discuss the one bid?
I don't know.
This is probably moving a
Oh.
little outside of the budget discussion.
Okay.
that's all.
Okay.
I got the big eye look just a second ago.
I know, I
so-
was like, that's why I
I
looked
have
down
the
like,
info, but I kept it.
Do you know off the top of your head when the recycling program that we're currently under was put into place and the budget created for essentially that program?
I don't. I know that we've been using the same municipal facility in Lexington for several years. I don't know exactly when we started using them. I feel like I've seen contracts that go back to maybe like 2013.
Okay.
What was the second part of the question? How we budget it?
Yeah.
So Lexington, the way they operate's a little different than a lot of places. They consign a lot of the materials. So I think at least the way we budgeted it this time is based on past years. It costs us a certain amount, but then we actually get money back from them. So we're budgeting the difference there. Most other facilities don't do that. So if we end up going somewhere else, we might have to budget differently.
Yeah. Any clue if we're on pace or on target with other communities our size in Kentucky?
In terms of volumes?
Volumes and costs that we have.
In terms of cost, I think we're on track or doing better than some because we go to a facility that does, consign. In terms of volumes, I'd really have to look and see what other, like a per capita thing in other cities, but I'd have to look into that.
Thank you, Sarah.
So the recycle thing, we need to put on the June the 28th agenda for Ms. Ross to explain that, because there are a couple of how we ended up with this partner, this person, or this contract, blah, blah, blah. Things of that nature that are gonna be in the legalese on this thing is why we only got one bid back, but we can explain that in that meeting to y'all, and we'll get that on there so we can revisit if we think, or rebid if we think we need to.
Can't wait.
I'm just gonna smile.
Anything else for public?
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you,
And I
guys.
apologize, but it's a special call.
That's the easiest you could say?
I'm looking at Ms. Ross every second.
Fun fact, I audited the recycle center in Lexington when I was an internal auditor there. But don't ask me any questions, I don't remember any of it. So. That was a long time ago. And I have a grandchild now, so there you go. Okay. So now we're on to parks, recreation, and historical sites. It's obviously for quality of life, we want our good parks. And I want to say that parks budget is roughly $3.3 million. We did the parks budget a little differently this year. So just to kind of explain it to you very quickly, in the past, most of the salaries were budgeted for in the Juniper Hill Park Administration line item, or their budget, department budget, I should say. But Sean worked really hard Director Pickens worked really hard to budget salaries truly where they belong in those various other parks, which also have their own department budgets. So that's why you're seeing a change. And then the other thing that we did too, with the help of Director Pickens' staff, they went through and actually calculated what they thought each of the hours would be for each of these department park budgets for seasonal and part-time, rather than just arbitrarily saying everyone's going to work 1,500 hours if they're seasonal, everyone's going to work 1,199 hours if they're part-time. So they really did a deep dive on that and tried to come up with a more reasonable amount of hours for each of these parks. And then the rest of the personnel costs then are the 10 full-time staff, and they're scattered throughout the various parks department budgets as well. So that's why those numbers look a little different. And also, of course, as I said, we've got pension costs, we've got 2% COLAs for last year and this year budgeted in that as well. But as you can see for operating cost, the total for that particular part from 2021 to 2022, the total went down. Just like we did with every other department, we were trying to cut out costs or budgeted costs we didn't feel like we needed. So,
Is the personnel cost the 2%, 12%, is that where we're seeing the major jump in the difference between the 2021 budget and the 2022 budget? It appears to be about $300,000.
for parks.
Personnel, yeah.
Yeah, that would be part of it, but, and maybe Tommy can speak to this even a little better than I can. I really believe that, well, let me go move on to the next one, sorry. That really doesn't tell us anything, I apologize for that. So, I think that parks truly did need some additional part-time and seasonal people. They had a lot of folks that were working really long hours in previous years, and so we budgeted, as I said, we didn't budget positions so much as we budgeted how many hours we felt that it would take to operate those parks. So some of the parks only have part-time and seasonal
Right.
employee hours, but then other parks have full-time, part-time, and seasonal. So my initial reaction to that question, Commissioner Thompson, would be that we budgeted for what he truly felt like he needed to adequately operate those parks, if that helps any at all. And then, of course, in addition to the pension and the COLA costs, that increases that we knew we were gonna get as well. So,
And the one reason that we asked to separate the man hours into the parks, because I couldn't tell you in the beginning of this thing, whether I had 27 guys working at Capitol View, or I had 83 guys working at Juniper, because they were all under the Juniper Hill, that one budget. So we asked them to split them out, so I could truly see if that was an effective way to look at staffing numbers. And, you know, when it comes up, man, I see these guys they're not busy all day long, then I'm gonna make sure that we get, you know, an hour for our dollar. So that's the reason that was, and we wanted to estimate the number of hours correctly. So,
My question would be that I don't see Dolly Graham on the list of parks.
I think it is
Um,
part of
It's under the-
Riverview.
yes.
It's part of Riverview's park.
It's so it's considered that, and
Yes.
so within that breakdown, since it is part of Riverview, and it's not broken, I just want to make sure that the community understands that, because that'll be the first thing, that
Yes.
Dolly Graham's not listed, and
Right. It's
so
part
we
of
need to
Riverview.
make sure that we're putting that down so people can see that in our budget, because it is a very sensitive subject sometimes. But also, within that being said, you know, with Riverview, I know that there are, you know, lots of things that, you know, could be done, I guess, at Riverview, but also, what are we doing for Dolly Graham? I know the $250,000 grant that we have is already there in capital for that, and that'll be covered. Not to say that we won't extend more money there, because something may pop up that we need. Is that in the budget for this, or is that something that we're looking to revisit the next year?
So are you talking about the
talking
splash
about Dolly?
pad or
Well, the splash
other
pad and everything
things?
would be
Oh.
covered under the $250,000. And we
Uh,
know that we may be stretching outside our boundaries, because
Most of
that's
it.
only $250,000. So I am aware that, you know, a lot of
Yeah.
people say, well, why did we wait for the grant? Well, the grant's not gonna pay for everything. It's gonna pay for a
No.
majority of things,
And we
but.
don't wanna lose the grant, right?
Right, exactly. So we
utilize
wanna
it.
use that to the fullest capacity,
Yes.
but then that will come out of our budget, anything after that. And so
Yes, ma'am.
is that budgeted in here? So once we continue to move forward with the splash pad and everything, hopefully being done by next spring, you know,
that will
are
come
we
back
able
to
to
you
do
all
that
sometime this year.
as amendment?
Sean
Okay,
will
budget
come
amendment.
back, I'm already aware that he's gonna ask for probably another $100,000 to finish the project down
Right.
there.
Okay,
Now, we had another conversation about another piece of property that we will
Yes.
share with you all on June the 28th.
I'm
To
excited.
see what happens there. But I do know that Mr. Pickens told me, he said, you cut me wherever you want, you just let me finish Dolly. And I said,
Yeah.
absolutely, sir, we will do that.
Okay,
So I do know there is gonna be a cost overrun there, so we can have the nicest place available, get the most bang for our buck. But I am fully aware of that, and I'm making you all aware of that right now, so.
Well, and of course, that's I assume you mean more of the capital improvement, expenses of the capital improvement type, and of course, those would come out of our general fund, unreserved fund balance.
Right.
But like we said, that was something we told the directors, bring it to them at a later date. And, you know, we can, as you guys feel comfortable with what you want our rainy day fund to be and that type of thing, then you can budget for some of those things, so.
And could I just request one thing, sorry, just to follow up, could I just request that before we let the budget out for the community to download or read, could we just put a dash Dolly Graham?
Oh, yeah,
I will
because
be-
Christian Wilkins
please.
takes care of Riverview, the downtown area, and Dolly.
Right.
Those are his, and Fort Hill, those are his areas. So,
Right.
you know, all of them have assigned parks that they take care of, and that's
Understandable.
just the name of it. But we will make that
That would-
notation.
What I'll do is
Absolutely.
I'll do a slash Dolly Graham.
That would be.
Okay.
Can we
I'm happy
create
to
a
do.
separate line item for it? That way we know and can show
I-
what we're
That's what-
spending
Well,
on
so if
the
it's,
park.
I could do that if, of course, you see Riverview's budget is 149,780 plus another 101,3. So if Sean has a breakdown, we could split those apart. I don't know,
In the
maybe
future,
not.
I mean,
Our,
I just think going forward,
yeah,
I think that would be a.
maybe not for fiscal year 22, but going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
I'm-
that would
I
just be good, and it would help
misunderstood.
with understanding that Dolly Graham
Right.
is not being left out, it's actually wrapped into another
It
park
is.
or what
Yeah.
have you, but
Yeah, okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and I can add something to that too that goes out that
If we
shows
have
it.
it, and if it's easily broken down and we can do it in 20, but is that, I don't,
I'm not sure, that's
separate reading, I
probably
don't
a
know.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
city
Okay.
solicitor.
Thank you.
thank you.
Question. You're welcome. We kind of already talked about this, budgeted expenditures now aligned with each park, and then we spoke about the ways we came up to our personnel costs for the parks. Planning and community development, that would be Director Cockley's area, and as you can see, he actually went down in both areas. I'm sorry, he went down in one area and up in one area for his total budget, but his total budget is going to be a little bit lower than what it was in fiscal year 21. So some of the things to note about his budget: personnel costs reflect full staff. He's got a CLG grant match in there, shared electrical inspector. I assume that's with the county. Yeah, shared electrical inspector with the county. That special capital district design guide is included in there, budgeted at $30,000. I guess it's for one of the other areas that's not been touched yet as far as
The last one that we
the
have to
historical district review. That's in there. And then the public input website, I think frankly speaking, yes. And then, of course, he also has to budget for the planning commission, half of the cost the city has with the county on that. And then they just have other things like mowing, demolition, they have to board up structures, things of that nature, so. Okay, and then, of course, last on the general fund part will be city commission and administration. And I grouped a lot of the departments together for this. It's kind of what I did for the budget book last year. So the city commission obviously is you all, and your personnel costs are roughly the same. If you'll notice, your operating costs went from 3.2 million down to 796,000 from one year to the next, and the reason for that is there were a ton of subsidies in fiscal year 21. We had the small business grants, we had the payments we made to help all the various organizations through the pandemic. We had the Humane Society amended; it was amended for that. The Simon House, those types of things. So that's why it went down drastically from 2021 to 2022. And if you'll notice, the other departments for the most part went down slightly. Insurance did go up a little because the HR director, I asked her to let me know about workers' comp and unemployment insurance, and those amounts went up just a little. So we had to budget for a little bit more for those. Debt service, the good thing about debt service, and I'll go ahead and move on. In 2022, we'll have our final EOC bond payment, and it's going to be roughly $900,000. So that'll come off the budget after fiscal year 22. So we'll be happy for that. That transfer out of $150,000 in fiscal year 2022, that is budgeted to go into the stormwater fund to account for 3 stormwater projects our public works director wants to have in fiscal year 2022, but when we get to that part of the budget discussion, I'll point that out to you again. So really, there's not a whole lot of difference from last year to this year, other than subsidies, as I said, went down quite a bit. And we just had a couple of other things that got added. Our historic preservation officer was included, obviously added this year. And we had the strategic initiatives consultant got added to your budget as well. And also, I did want to point out one other thing, that contingency line item. So I worked with the HR director on this. Every year we pay out to employees who either resign or retire. And then if someone retires, we have to pay out a sick leave portion to the Kentucky Retirement Systems as well. And she did a 3-year average, and it was $385,000. We don't know which departments that might impact. So rather than try to pick and choose which departments to put that into, I put it down in contingency just so we would have a line item for it, because it is a true expense we have every year. You know, it's going to be between $300,000 and $400,000 on average every year. So I wanted to reflect that in the budget somewhere. Does anybody have any other questions on any of that? And then this is your subsidies. I think everyone has seen that. If you have any questions on that, I think the city manager might be better suited to answer any questions you have on those. And this obviously is his recommendations on that last column, and it totals $655,500, and it is reflected in your budget. So,
Mr. City Manager, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Mayor.
Commissioner Thomas.
Mr. City Manager, I need like better glasses or something. Y'all
I
made
know, it
this
is so
super
tiny.
small.
That would
Uh,
be my fault. I apologize.
Y'all.
Trust me, y'all. Oh, I need that. Can you talk to me about your recommendations, Mr. City Manager, for KCDC, Downtown Frankfort Inc., Tourist and Convention Committee, and the Chamber of Commerce, please?
So the chamber, I'll stand up, I apologize. The chamber did not request any funding from us this year.
Okay.
The rest of those are, have requested funding again. KCDC, we have funded for, they're 25 years in existence or something like that now. The funding had gone up to $115,000. Franklin County Fiscal Court funds them at $85,000. I don't see the reason that we should fund exponentially more money than Franklin County Fiscal Court does. The entity I'm happy with. We just need to make sure that we're back on the path of direction and we know where we're going, and that I feel like sometimes there are paths are crossed and not everybody's driving in their lane, and maybe we're getting these things mixed up. I did have a conversation with one of our staff members today to try to sort this out, and that's what we're doing right now. But I just felt like that was a fair number, and having conversations with you all, I think that everybody is in agreement with that.
Is $85,000 what fiscal court has budgeted for 2022?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. As far as DFI, that 65.5 in that year there, we had been at 45.5 for several years. That went up to 65.5 when they came up with Bourbon on the Banks and hired a new director. When the director left and Bourbon on the Banks took a different approach, the funding never did change. I just thought it was time to change the funding back to less than that. They had requested $70,000 this year. I just think for the numbers that they're asking for, that we need to have more say-so in that. If we're going to fund them if I did KCDC at 115 and DFI at 70, $200,000, and I want more say-so. I think we need more say-so in the game. That said, DFI, we can set that at anything. Looks to me like and I'm not gonna say this, and I don't mean to offend anybody, we want to continue the event funding, I think, that they do downtown for sure. And then give our illustrious staff member time to work this out, and by all means, if they need more funding, they are more than welcome to come back to us and say, this is what we've got going, this is how we think we can help you all. Can I have another X number of dollars? And I will absolutely entertain that and bring that to you all. But we will, I'm just looking to see, we are trying to sort those things out, because I feel like sometimes we're not always on the right path. So I just think for that much money, if we're putting into it, that we need to revisit all of this. And I'm sure I'm gonna make somebody mad, and the intention is not to make anybody mad. But we need to take hold of this and make sure that we get the most bang for our buck.
Mr. City Manager, as a follow-up, in our conversation that we had, I know I told you that I wanted to dramatically decrease KCDC and DFI from the last few years. I think they are, you have done that. I agree with you with regard to fiscal court. Quite honestly, I think there could have been more cutting, and I'll be the guy that everybody get mad at that way. But I hope staff and the commission can work some things out, and we can, again, Mayor, another reason I think we need to have this joint meeting with the county to discuss these issues. I mean, we're both funding it. We both want a seat at the table and a little more control, and maybe we need to reorganize those organizations and make sure we're doing everything that we need to do to get there. So I will defer to your recommendation on this, and I thank you. I just wanted to say that that's my personal opinion.
Okay. And the joint meeting is not on this agenda.
I know.
So just a reminder.
I know.
Commissioner
He says it with every comment. He makes sure he says it every comment. But no, I agree, and we talked in detail over these. Definitely those three were my top in some of the funding. However, with the proposals that came, with the proposals and the breakdowns, is there, you can share that with us on what their proposals are, where they're wanting this money to go, so we can have a little bit more understanding of what they feel their goals are on why they're asking us for a certain amount, and then that could give the city, the BOC, us as a board, and I guess a starting point of what they think their goals and objectives are for the city, and then we can say what we want, what we don't want, or what we want to improve or what we want to add, so we can stop all of this crossing over and duplicating services. Why pay them one thing if another one is doing it? And we need to stop duplicating services and use the services that we need from each entity. So I do agree with the activity, and I agree that either one of these groups and entities can come back and amend. But I mean, I agree with some of the cuts, and think that if we, the Board of Commissions, can see those ask on what this money is what is the $85,000 from KCDC? What is she asked for? What is her goal she's going to do? Same thing with DFI. Is that just help funding concerts, or what is that going to be? So we know, and then we can say, hey, we want them to do this or not, and that will help us understand more of what this number looks like on our goals and objectives as a city as a whole.
I agree with you 100%, Commissioner. As I looked through you saw the book on my desk that was that thick that had all of the asks in there.
Right.
And I went and read through that, and it's very hard to tell. There's a general overview and a mission statement and things like that. But we intend to begin work on this immediately, because I do not want any of these agencies to go, if they truly need the funds, and it is going to be a benefit to the citizens of this county, I truly do not want them to go unfunded, and I will bring that recommendation back to you all. But I want them to prove their worth to us.
Yes, sir.
I think that's where we stand. I think that's as honest as I can be with you all. Now, if we want to go into the next line down through there, where we go into Council on Aging, things like that, I pretty much cut those budgets 10%. I cut the ask 10%, because we have a 12% pension funding, and I didn't do 12%, I just did the 10%. And I'm not going to use your statement, but I want to encourage those people to fundraise as much as they can, and then truly bring the ask back to us and bring the product to us. I will say that Ms. Blair Hecker and I have a conversation about the CARES Coalition, and I've allowed her X number of dollars to put that together and get that started. So she is gonna start on that, and we have discussed that, and I think that's the best idea we have going forward, to bring all of those peoples together under one roof, under one umbrella, gather the funding that we need, and then make it quasi-government or something like that, and somebody else make the decision on the funding internally amongst those groups. And Blair has already started on that, so I believe she's got somebody on boarded from maybe Cincinnati or something like that, Ms. Blair? Yes. Okay. So we have already started that project now. We know that this is always political, you know. Okay, I know Commissioner Unger, I'll go speak to her, I'll get that $2,000 back. Well, and that's fine. They can bring it to us as long as they prove their worth. I will bring it to you all every single time. And I, as emergency management director, I deal with all of those agencies. And it pains my heart, but then again, you know, I have to have enough money, we have to have enough money to run the city. No ifs, ands, or buts. And if we run out of money, then they are gonna be in dire straits. So hence the 10% reduction. I don't think it's gonna put anybody out of business. I just want to encourage everybody to do as much as they can for themselves, so we can move forward, and this thing will work itself out.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner?
I guess one thing that I would like to do, and I appreciate that, and definitely Blair stepping in to help out with that. But I guess one thing from BOC that I've noticed over the last 2 years as serving is that we never really got updates from them. You know, could we get updates from them along the way so we know what they're doing with our money as it's happening? That could be them come in, Mayor, for 5 minutes before the meeting, or maybe just a one-pager that they send to us to let us know what they're doing, where this funding is going, and celebrate some of the great things that they're doing with the money that we gave. I think that would behoove us, and knowing that the next time we don't hear from them is budget year for 2023.
Yes.
You know, and then now they're asking for this, but we really don't know what's going on. And so I think that just helps us in putting money there, knowing where it's being used, and for us to even be a part of some things if they're going on or they're having programs and things of that nature. So
Yes, I think quarterly reports or any way that we want it would certainly help us to understand where these monies are going to from the community, you know, as tax dollars passed out back out into the community, and I would agree with that 100%.
I guess my main thing was the men's shelter as well, of knowing when people come in, where they're coming from. Are they really Frankfort homeless? Is it a Frankfort homeless issue, or is it a drop off in Frankfort homeless issue? And that will help when people come in to get services. We don't need their name or social security number, but I'd like to know if they're from Nashville, Tennessee, or if they're from Louisville or Woodford County being dropped here. We want to know that information.
Well, let me say this. We can try to find that information out. When they call me, or Chief Adams or Chief Briscoe in the middle of the night, it makes no difference where they're from. They're in Frankfort, so they're Frankfort homeless. You know that.
Right.
We are gonna go, we are gonna respond, but I will try to get with the new interim director, or he might even be named the director now, I'm not for sure. We had a meeting with him one day and see what those statistics are. You know, it might be pertinent, but then again, I have to tell you that we're gonna respond no matter what, you know, to take care of what we have to take care of, so.
And by any means, I'm not saying respond, but it helps us understand, is it a Frankfurt issue?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
why? Is it unemployment, that they're not finding jobs here in
Yeah.
Frankfurt? Is it that landlords' rent is going way up high? Like, we can handle that in Frankfurt, but if they're imports, they're coming in, we could know that also to see how we can handle. That's a different issue.
Yeah.
So we can help the issue in Frankfurt maybe by making sure there's training for our people here, but also, why are you coming from other areas? And that's just, to me, you handle it a little different maybe.
Right.
But not to say, no, they don't get to stay in a hotel or a home or get food. That's not what I'm saying. But I just want to know where that issue's coming from, for us to know if that really is a Frankfurt issue, that more of our people, residents, taxpayers, are becoming homeless, and why, and how can we help, versus people being dropped off and being a Frankfurt issue. Sorry, go ahead. I'm
Okay.
probably getting off key. I'm watching you guys.
I'm just watching.
We're looking at the clock.
Trying to catch her out of there.
I'm
Laura,
like, just
Laura
go
gave
like
me a
this, Mayor,
hard
like
number she
Laura's
had to
looking
leave
at
A
you.
hard stop. Okay.
Okay. Go
So I'll
ahead.
let that go and
Done.
I'll work on that. How about that?
Okay, thank
Ms.
you.
Ross?
Next. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Okay, so, on to capital improvements and the capital assets budget. Just one quick thing to remember. A capital budget, capital projects budget's different obviously from the general budget. It follows the project, so I didn't do as good a job last year with explaining this as I'm hoping that I'm doing better this year on it. So that's why I stuck this ongoing capital improvements list in here so that Commissioner Waldridge could in fact answer to anybody that asked. Yes, Dolly Graham is continuing on. It's a project. We have the funds for it. Between cash reserves and revenues, we have enough to fund everything that's in here with the revenues we expect to get. So, just like Thoroughbred Trail and then the Pensley Trail, even though they're one and the same, that Pensley Trail's the railing. It was done separately, so I stuck it on there separately. But obviously you can see we've got a lot of projects going in various stages of completion. And we do have the funding, once we count the grant revenue we're gonna get for all of those. This is the stormwater, ongoing projects. We have some that are in progress, early stages, obviously not started, Willow Street. And, the Public Works Director's using KIA money to fund those, as well as she did for the one that was completely finished, which was Collins Lane. So we've got that one, and then your other commitments, previous commission, committed money for these various organizations. And, I stuck it on here just so it would be on your mind that we have a potential $3.6 million commitment in total. And obviously those organizations have to meet varying degrees of some criteria before we would want to start sending that money out to them. But they're not really budgeted anywhere, and that money would come from unreserved general fund balance. We have new capital asset and capital improvement projects that the directors brought to us. They brought a lot more than $126,000 worth, but Tommy and I, we talked with them, and we did get it down to a couple that we really truly felt we needed to go on ahead and work on. The police chief is getting 2 SUVs. He asked for more than 2, but right now he's getting 2. And he's actually got 2 we're working on right now as well. So, but we do have enough in the capital improvements fund to also fund that $126,000 right now. So we're good on that. Municipal aid is kind of its own creature. For lack of a better word, we get road monies from the state, and it can only be used on streets. So any of the big ticket items that Public Works needs, we typically budget for in municipal aid, and then when they do street resurfacings and things of that nature, they're gonna budget and spend the money for municipal aid over there, because I know I've told you guys all this before. If you have expenses and you have restricted money and you have unrestricted monies, we need to spend our restricted monies first to save our unrestricted for down the road for any number of things we can use that money for. So that's one of the things that I fully believe in, is spending restricted monies first, which Fort Hill is restricted monies. And the Parks Director said, hey, we need these new decks and the stairs, and we need some signage over there. And I said, well, let's budget for that in the Fort Hill Fund, which is what this is going to be used for when he gets to that point and needs those projects to be completed. And we talked about stormwater. She's going to end up with around $150,000 left in the cash reserves for stormwater. So the $150,000 additional will come from the general fund to fund those 3 stormwater projects that she brought to us and says she needs. And then, of course, just for basically for informational purposes, the Tiger Grant, that's all pretty much fully funded at this point. We expect to get federal dollars that flow. I don't know if it flows through the state or not. It probably does, but the amount of money that will incur in the next fiscal year expenses will get reimbursed for that. Y'all have any questions on those? Okay, and then the last but certainly not least, the sewer department. So, as you can tell, his personnel costs only went up slightly. Once again, pensions, COLAs, that kind of thing. Now, the thing about his operating costs for 2022, he has two funds. He's got a capital improvements fund, and then he has his operations and maintenance fund. Well, rather than have operation and maintenance cost in his capital improvements fund, it's going to be easier for them to track their capital projects by moving all of that over into their operations and maintenance fund. So that's why you see a sharp increase in the budget for 2021 and the budget for 2022. It was just simply shifting costs from one fund to the other. So
Where was the? It's $1.8 million. So I
where-
think I budgeted for administration from 2021 to 2022.
For sewer.
Operating costs,
Oh
administration.
yeah. Yes, you're right. Yes. Yeah. So
And-
that's
and all-
right. The administration part is where the maintenance and operations. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Shifted from the capital improvements fund over into this particular fund, and it went from 2.1 million to 3.9 million. Yes.
Okay.
This
Did
is.
that answer that question?
It did.
He answered his own question.
Well, I
think.
guess my question is, did the capital because I can't remember when we were looking at it, did the capital improvement fund from last year reflect a $1.8 million difference?
No, it reflects a $8 million increase, because if you'll recall from our discussions, KIA requires that we budget, even though we don't expect to spend all that money in 1 year, we are expected to budget for that and reflect that in the budget. So that is part of and I think that the director can come up and speak to this even better than I can. That is probably some of the remaining capital project expenses that he expects to incur as a result of the consent decree.
I understand.
And then, of course, he also has long-term capital improvements that he needs to make to the plant itself and things of that nature. So no, it actually wouldn't. I mean, it went up 8 million, but that's the reason for that. And if you have any particular questions about that, I'm sure that Kenny can answer those.
I think that answers it for me. I
Okay.
was trying to figure that out, but thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then also this very last sheet, which I'm sure nobody will be able to see on their handout because it's really super small. Each of those individual line items are reflected in the capital improvements fund budget. And that way, if you want to know how he's spending or plans to spend the capital improvements monies and the KIA monies, that's the breakdown there. And I would assume, Kenny, correct me if I'm wrong, a majority of that's consent decree, but I'm sure there's other, like I said, long-term capital improvements that he needs to make as well, so.
Kenny, are we on pace to meet the consent decree requirements?
Depends if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, my question is, are we gonna get a letter in
Well,
3 years?
we're supposed to be done with our consent decree in 2023.
Okay.
Over the past 2 years, we've been doing a modeling project to model our entire system so that we can go to the state and either request that we have met the requirements or get an extension if they want us to stay on. We will not meet all of the projects by the end of 2023.
Okay.
But preliminary results from our modeling right now has us at 91% capture rate compared to we only had to meet 85% capture rate.
Great.
So once there's going to be something on the June agenda for Arcadis again so that we can schedule the meetings with the state and present this model to them, and that way I don't know how it will be received. I have no way to know that at this
Put a
point.
dollar
But
amount on something so boring, you're staring at me.
Yeah.
this saves us $20 million in fines. How about that?
That is
Actually, 19 points something, but
that is exactly
yes.
what I needed to hear. Thank you,
All right.
Kenny.
Thank you, Ken.
Just the very last, this is actually the last slide. So he's expecting revenue of around 13 million. That should cover all of his O&M operations and maintenance for the fiscal year. And then anything that's left over, we dump it over into cash reserves for capital improvements, because while we want to use KIA money that comes in at a really low rate, I mean, I think the last big loan he applied for was 1%. We still need to use some cash reserves too. There's that, magical line you don't want to cross, which I don't know what that is yet. I'm hoping to get some help with some folks that I can ask about that. But the other thing, he's got 2 bonds that will be coming off the books in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 26. So not too much longer. He'll have a couple of bond payments coming off, which will be good. And of course, we're going to have a lot of KIA loans. But those, like I said, those interest rates are crazy low right now. The one that was almost a $20 million loan was 1%. So it's a good way to get some of these things handled and get a low debt rate to go along with it. So, y'all, if you have any other questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain any of those. But I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very educational. Any other discussion, or we'll have a first reading?
Were there any changes to any numbers
We have a sponsor.
anybody could think of? No?
No, I don't think
No
anything changed. I
changes.
think we were okay with just amendments later
Okay.
on.
Amendments.
Okay.
Okay, we have a sponsor for the first reading by Commissioner Waldridge.
An ordinance appropriating the revenue to be received by the city of Frankfort for fiscal year 2021 to 2022. This ordinance appropriates revenue to be received by the city of Frankfort for fiscal year 2021-22 in accordance with the budget submitted and hereby approved.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. And next action item is resolution to support and celebrate Juneteenth in the city of Frankfort. I will entertain a motion to approve.
And make a motion to approve?
I will heartily second
Okay,
that.
we have a motion to approve and a second by Commissioner Thompson. Any debate or discussion? No? Okay. Ask the clerk to please call for a vote.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes.
Mayor.
Mhm.
I just want to thank the BOC for such a quick motion, Mayor, as well as yourself, and to get this done where it can be presented when we're down at Dolly Graham this weekend. So I appreciate that. I also would like to ask staff, if the BOC agrees, that I would like Frankfort to be one of the first cities to make Juneteenth a paid holiday off for our staff, starting in 2022. And I'd like for staff to draft that ordinance so we can have a first reading on June 28th if possible.
I think we can we talk about that on this agenda?
It's fine because it's related to
Okay.
June 19th. And
Perfect.
you all could just direct staff if there's no objection.
No
need for a vote.
objection, direct staff to do so.
And I will just say that as of yesterday, the Senate voted for it to be the 12th national holiday unanimously after one was changed. But I think it would be great for us to go ahead and do that where we're not always following behind. So thank you.
Any other discussion or entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll see you next time.